Hello, welcome to CCNA Subnetting Video 1 that comes with the book. In this video, you'll see an example of how to find the subnet number based on an IP address. In particular, we'll use IP address 128.200.100.100 with mask 255.255.224.0. This video helps you with the beginning of 3 steps toward perfecting your skills at finding the resident subnet ID. First off, this video goes over a particular process for finding the resident subnet. It's the same process that's in the book. Then you need to practice. Why do you practice? Well, obviously you need to get to the point where you get the right answer, but also you need to get faster. The exam's going to have some time pressure, so you need to practice these things until you can get the answer pretty quickly. In fact, step 3 is to practice until the process is second nature. Before you go to the exam, when you do some math for subnetting, you ought to be comfortable enough with it so that you're not thinking about each individual step. You see the problem, you do the math, you're done. So what is this idea of a resident subnet? Well, basically it's a subnet number, or a subnet ID if you prefer, and it's the subnet ID that's associated with a particular IP address. For instance, PC1 has that IP address you see on the screen, 128.200.100.100, and it's got the mask that you see there as well. So what is the subnet ID associated with that IP address and mask? Well, there's some math you can do, and the subnet ID would be 128.200.96.0. Why does that matter? Well, routers will do that same math, find the subnet ID, and build a connected route for that subnet associated with that interface. For instance, in this case, R1 will have the connected route you see on the right side of the screen for that subnet over on the left, the 128.200.96.0 subnet. So why is that so important? Well, the router essentially defines the range of addresses in that subnet based on that math. It's basically how the router knows which addresses sit over there on the left. So let's go over the process of how to find the resident subnet ID based on this IP address and subnet mask. First off, you can organize your problem by giving yourself a place to write down the mask and address, and then the subnet number that you'll find, and put those numbers on top of each other like you see there on the screen. So to start, we'll just copy the mask and IP address. I prefer the mask up at the top because it makes the presentation a little bit less cluttered, that's all. So I've got the 2 numbers there, and they're column aligned to make it a little bit easier as well. Then at the second step, we try to find the octet where the more difficult math is going to happen. If the mask has a value that's neither a 255 nor a 0, then that's where the difficult math is going to be. So we look at that, and of course the third octet in this case is the one that's more interesting, if you will. So we'll put a darker rectangle around that so we'll remember which octet is more difficult. At this point, the process takes care of the 3 easy octets. For any octets to the left of the interesting octet, you just copy the IP address down to the subnet number field. That's it. Any octets to the right, in this case the 4th octet's to the right, of course, you write down a 0. So we know the subnet number is going to be 128.200.something.0. Now let's move on to the interesting octet. Next, we need to find the magic number. Now the term magic number is just a word I made up years ago for a long ago edition of the books, but the idea is simple. You take 256 and you subtract the mask's value in this interesting octet. So in this case, it's 256 minus 224 for 32. Turns out the subnet number is going to be a multiple of 32. But which multiple? Well, let's write them all down. You start with 0 and write down all the multiples. Yes, you'll practice enough to where it'll be second nature to find these multiples pretty quickly. And then we need to find the one that's closest to the IP address's value, but not larger than it. So the IP address value in this octet is 100. So 100 is, of course, closest to 96 and 128, but 128 is bigger, so we pick 96. So as it turns out, the correct subnet number in this case is 128.200.96.0. So what to do from here? Well, first try a couple more problems right now. Take these 2 that you see on the screen, write them down on a piece of scratch paper, and go ahead and do them. Then review the next 2 subnetting videos, which review how to find these 2 problems using our process. That way you can work out any kinks in your understanding of how to go about finding it. Now, after doing 3 problems, you're not going to be great at it. You may understand how, but you probably won't be fast at it at that point. So keep practicing until you master the process, and practice your other subnetting tasks as well. Now, if you want more practice, the book has many practice suggestions, places to go to find more practice problems. In fact, the DVD that comes with the book has many appendices that point to some more practice problems. Subnetting is still one of the most important topics for the exam, particularly one of the most important to master the skills. So take some time, practice, and get good at it.